Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for a retro review. Today I'm going to talk about True Lies, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Directed by James Cameron, it's actually a remake of a French movie, but I'm going to talk about the probably more popular Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, also starring Jamie Lee Curtis. And this is a really fun movie. I think it really holds up now 30 years later. I think it's still worth watching, and I think there's still a lot of great things you can get out of it if you are evaluating it as a writer or a movie producer or something like that. It's of course has very high production value, and I think it was probably more influential than a lot of people give it credit for, and that is because of its focus on comedy. Right, the comic relief, not just comic relief, but really like a constant sense of absurdity and comedy that runs throughout the movie. That if you are trying to look at it as a straight action movie, you may not pick up on that layer. But that's really what makes True Lies, I think, a great movie and a great movie to watch. So if you haven't watched True Lies, the gist of it is this. Really simple A-B story. A story, there's terrorists. They want to blow up some cities with some nuclear bombs. B story is Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife. The B story is really the more interesting part. And I call it the B story because it's not the main MacGuffin. The main MacGuffin is like the terrorists. But the B story is a romance B story, but a totally different kind of romance B story from what you normally get. It is a B story where we have to repair the relationship, not matriculate the relationship. Most romances, it's boy meets girl, conflict gets resolved, matriculation begins. They begin a relationship, right? They become boyfriend, girlfriend, or get married or something like that. That's the standard sort of romantic arc that most stories have. This one, they're already married, but then their marriage is in crisis and they have to have that romantic arc to save the marriage. So it's really funny. There's like meta levels to this that I think are so interesting to look at. So the main character's name is Harry Tasker. He has a wife. His wife does not know he's a spy. So that's the big setup for the romance of this movie. The wife thinks he just like sells computers or something, but he's been a spy since he met her. He keeps it secret for security reasons, like the reasons of national security. The movie opens up with him doing a bunch of spy stuff. He goes to this like James Bond like party. He's wearing a tuxedo. He like sneaks in through the water, puts on a tuxedo, and there's the funny thing where he puts on the cologne. There's all these funny moments. There's even a funny moment where like there's the attack dogs jumping, and he smashes their heads together. The action's over the top right from the beginning, and right from the beginning we have all of this comic relief. But it just sets up like this is a spy movie. It's a spy action movie. Look at how fun this action is. And then the next scene, he's pretending to be a computer salesman. His wife doesn't know that he's a spy. Now she gets bored. Of course, she's a bored housewife. So what does she do? She begins an affair with a spy, or who she thinks is a spy. Turns out he's a used car salesman, played by Bill Paxton. And Bill Paxton is just hilarious in this movie, saying some absolutely dirty and raunchy things about he's basically driving Harry around in a car, saying these awful things about his wife, not knowing that it's his wife. It's just very, very funny stuff. So she gets tricked into, now she hasn't begun like a physical affair, but this guy's trying to manipulate her into having an affair. And what attracts her to it is the excitement of it, this excitement of the spy romance story. So how does he fix the marriage? It's by giving her the spy romance story. And at first it's an intentional, I'm giving my wife the spy romance story. First he stalks his wife to figure out what's going on, and then he decides to fix this by giving her what she wants, which is like a spy story. And then unintentionally she ends up living that out as the A story comes crashing into the B story and turns everything upside down for the characters. And you have a literally explosive climax with a surprise final act that is one of the best surprise final acts of any action movie from the 1990s, and maybe any action movie, period. Because, of course, what happens is Harry uses the resources of his spy, his spy organization is called like the Omega Sector, and you have Charlton Heston there, like berating them. It's just like it's such a great classic movie just because it has like Chuck Heston in it. that comes crashing in when she gets abducted, and they both end up getting abducted and get brought to this island, and they have to escape the island, and the island gets blown up with a nuclear bomb. And then there's a surprise act where Harry has to jump into a jet and go save his daughter who's been abducted, and of course the heroes win, save the day. This should be spoilers to you because this movie is now 30 years old. And it wraps up the B story with the A story, just like complete nice little tie-off bow, where the wife gets what she wanted, which was excitement in her life, and to have a deeper and more meaningful relationship with her husband. Her husband was boring because she felt like he had nothing to say to her. She didn't really know him. And so through this literally explosive conclusion to the B story, she gets to know him and therefore can develop a real romance with him. And then we tie up the A story with another threat to his family, which is his daughter, his out-of-control daughter. That's kind of a C story, is that because of him being an absentee father, because of him being absent from his family by being a spy, of course, his wife wants to begin an affair. And then on a deeper level, his daughter is an out-of-control teenager riding on the back of motorcycles with boys and stealing money from her parents to do whatever kind of stuff. So by turning his focus back to his family, he is able to fix those things basically by doing spy stuff. He saves his daughter, saves his wife, stops the bad guys. There's even a little love triangle with Tina Carrere in there where she basically just exists to have one scene with like some jealousy between the wife and her, where he's been a spy and kind of led her on to things. It's not like a real love triangle. We're never in any doubt that Harry is going to be faithful to his wife, and we're honestly never in any doubt that Jamie Lee Curtis's character, who's the character name I've forgotten, is going to cheat on her husband, but rather we want them to feel good about each other and to save their marriage before they do something bad about it. Now, where I think this is really influential, I should actually mention before I go any further, there's a great score by Brad Fiedel, who did the Terminator 2 score. He stopped doing movie scores, and it's kind of a pity because this is actually a pretty good one. It doesn't have, to me, it's kind of what you would hear more from later things, where instead of like big John Williams kind of themes and lots of motion, it's big brass hits, like big 5-note brass hits that repeat over and over again. It's something that I would expect from a score from like an Avengers movie, rather than a 1990s action movie by itself. But anyway, it does really good. The reason it's so influential, besides like the score elements like showing up in later movies, is because of that sense of comedy. And this is probably the big thing that you'll pick up on if you go and watch this, is that this movie's really funny. And I realize, looking back to a lot of reviews at the time, I think critics didn't get this movie. They didn't get the multiple levels of humor that existed for this movie, because there are lots of jokes in the movie. There's tons of comic relief. There's no action scene that happens without some kind of comic relief happening. And the kind of comic relief that happens is the character's not really being serious about the story. The kind of comic relief quips that James Bond would do, we're like cranking those up to 11, to the point where, the things are just said that are kind of ridiculous and completely out of place. At that same time, the action itself is comedy, because the action is sort of like last action hero stuff. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie as Arnold Schwarzenegger. The action is intentionally over the top and funny. It's intentionally extreme and bizarre and there to make you laugh. And I think critics actually didn't understand that, because they hadn't seen a lot of action movies. Most action movies in the 1990s played it really straight with the action. They weren't doing like almost like ironic or comedy action. They were just doing action. So if you see a critic that's critical over like, oh, here's this kind of hammy terrorist story, it's like that's part of the point of the setup. It's Team America World Police, but in 1994. So if you've seen Team America World Police and you haven't seen True Lies, Team America is just doing True Lies, but even more comedy and with puppets. as far as like its setup and its comedy go. It begins with some really hilarious action. It's like James Bond, but we're kind of winking at the audience, going like, yeah, James Bond, but James Bond's actually really silly with like invisible cars and stuff. And so we're just going to do it more. He like slams dog heads together. He's falling backwards through the snow, shooting guys with his pistol, just popping them off. And then he hops in a van and drives away and escapes. And it's like, okay, like those things are so incongruent, but in a lesser movie that wouldn't have made any sense. You would have thought it was stupid, but they're sort of operating in a way that's like, this is pretty ridiculous and stupid, isn't it? Isn't it ridiculous and stupid? Oh yeah, his wife doesn't know he's a spy. You have things where he like is shooting fire with the gas, where his wife he's telling her, shoot them, shoot them, and the pistol, or it's like an Uzi or like a Mac-10 or something. It's falling down the stairs and randomly shoots all the bad guys, right? So these things are supposed to be funny, and we'll see things like this pop up 10 years later in movies like Pirates of the Caribbean and the MCU. These Disney would pick up on audiences liking this stuff and start to really hammer it in the 2000s. And that's where I think the movie is probably more influential than people really realize. That James Cameron, being an action movie director, and Arnold Schwarzenegger being an action movie star, were like, let's crank it up to 11 and be silly. It'll be so much action, we're going to make it silly. Harry's going to jump into a plane and fly a plane to save everybody. He's going to jump into a Harrier jet. Of course, there's a bunch of comedy because he can't really fly it. We're going to, we're going to have him kiss while a nuclear bomb goes off. We're going to have all of these absolutely ridiculous things, and we're going to interrupt all of those moments that there would be tension. There's not really tension because of how over the top it is, with a lot of comedy. Harry, how long have you been a spy? He's like, 25 years. It's like, have you ever killed anybody? Yeah, but they were all bad. Those sorts of jokes. This is the exact sort of jokes that you would see in the MCU. And so, yeah, I think it's actually a really influential action movie in ways that we probably didn't realize back in the 1990s. But as things went on, we would see that style of filmmaking be the most popular style of filmmaking for, at this point, almost 20 years, starting with Pirates of the Caribbean 20 years ago, which I'll do another retro review of Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, because it's now a movie that's more than 20 years old. Crazy to think about because of the way things work post-cultural ground zero, but it's a retro movie, and we'll do a retro review of that one too. But True Lies, I do recommend it. I would probably, just offhand, I'm going to give it 4 stars. I'm going to give it an A. I think it is a solid A action movie. The things that you would say would break it, like the fact that you have an American spy with a German accent, don't, because of that winking at the fourth wall, because there's a performative action with the audience in mind for every single action move and the setup of the movie entirely. Everything ends up working perfectly well with this movie, which is itself weirdly a remake. So anyway, let me know what you think, and I will see you all next time. Have a great day. Oh, by the way, you can support me on Patreon. You can join my Patreon. You get a free copy of this book at the lower tiers, and you get a different free book every month. I haven't put up the January book, but I have all the past books up from like October onward. So if you actually join in January, you'll get like 5 free books, or something like 4 free books. But yeah, Keys to Prolific 5 free books, including Keys to Prolific Creativity, help you develop your creative process and get your projects done. Have a great one, and I'll see you all next time.